Welcome to WhichDraft. This is Jason Mark Anderman. Today I'm going to give you the lowdown on our purchase agreement that covers pretty much everything you'd care about when you're going to buy services or deliverables. Deliverables is another word for goods. First thing you're going to think about when you're buying services is having a really good description that spells out exactly what you're buying from the vendor. If you don't have a good description as to the services and instead just dash off something quick that's kind of vague, if you are unhappy later with what's being provided, you have no remedy other than to come up with a bunch of evidence and threaten them with a lawyer. You don't want to get into that. What you want is to make your life easy, and the way you do that is really thinking up front hard as to exactly what you're buying and putting in a great description right there that'll make your life easy. The next thing you might want to think a bit about is having a background check. And that pretty much is just an obligation of the vendor to say, hey, we're going to take a good look at the people that we'd put on site at the customer's premises and make sure there's nothing there that's surprising about them that makes them risky. You also might think, hey, there's some great people who work for the vendor who are really key personnel that I want to make sure provide me the services specifically. Spell out their names here, and the vendor will have to provide them for you. Also a good idea to have project managers so everybody knows who to talk to on either side. Deliverables, as I said, is another word for goods. And when you're buying goods, just like the services, you want a crystal clear description that avoids fights later as to what is supposed to be provided. You really want to put as much time as you can up front in describing exactly what the services and deliverables or goods are. Make sure that you have a deadline that protects you in case you end up with a vendor that drags their feet. This way you can say, hey, you've got to get me the services and deliverables by this time frame. And a good way to do it is just give them a certain number of days after the effective date of the agreement. Effective date is usually the date that you sign it. Make sure that you spell any assumptions that you need to meet as a customer so the vendor can hit the deadline. Usually that might mean providing office space or certain cabling on site at your premises so they can install things properly. If you don't do that, then they get extra days until you do. Ownership, title, and risk of loss is pretty much where you take full control over all of the goods as they're being given to you by the vendor. The vendor usually wants to do that at the point that they ship and put the obligation to insure it during shipping on you, the customer. You might push back and say, hey, I'm only going to take control of everything once it's received by me. Or you might say, I'm going to hold it up to a certain standard and evaluate it, and if it meets that standard, I'll officially accept it by notice to you, and only then am I going to take ownership, title, and risk of loss of the goods. When you're nailing down the fee, you might do a flat fee. You could do a rate fee where you pay by the hour or you pay by the day. You do a guaranteed maximum fee. That's where you pay the less of the flat fee or whatever aggregated out from the hourly or daily. You can pay by the service or by the deliverable, or you can just pay by milestones, such as I'm only going to pay you X dollars once everything is fully installed. Payment schedule is really important. Different ways to slice and dice it. A lot of people do a third on the effective date, a third when they get the goods, and a third once it's accepted. You can also pay by the month or pay by milestones. Conditions can come up. You might want to say, hey, you're going to give me the pricing you're giving me under this deal for all the other companies that I might own. You might say, I'm going to get as good pricing on this particular deal as you give to any other customer you have. And the vendor might say to you, hey, I need you to do certain things, like that cabling and office space we talked about before, in order to meet the deadlines and charge you the fees that I expected to charge here. You might get an early payment discount, such as if you pay within 10 days of being invoiced, you get 2% off. And you want to make clear whether or not you're going to pay for expenses incurred in providing the services. Intellectual property is important. Are you getting all of the IP rights, the patents, the copyrights, trade secrets assigned to you by the vendor? Do they get to hold on to things that they invented before they started working for you? Or are you just getting a license? That's pretty much it. You might want to think about a warranty. Otherwise, that's the purchase agreement.